Hello, Sunnyside. It's been a while since I had the opportunity to come before you. This is 2026. Thank goodness 2025 is past. Okay, so let's look ahead. And at the same time, let's go over some things that's really an important part of our history that perhaps there are some who really would not want you to know about it. I'm going to start off with a few of my quilts, with one in particular. It says, many of the rights and privileges we now enjoy came about because of the sacrifice of others. Homes were bombed, churches bombed, Black children killed. Voter suppression truly is real. Then it goes on to say Texas, Tennessee, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky. I cannot believe that I did not put Alabama in there, okay? I am from Birmingham, Alabama, and that's where my interest, I'm sure, of history really begins. I'm going to take you now to Montgomery, Alabama, and I'm going to read to you a letter that was sent out to the people of Montgomery, and perhaps you will be able to immediately know what this is all about. It says, this is for Monday, December 5th, 1955. Another Negro woman has been arrested and thrown into jail because she refused to get out of her seat on the bus for a white person to sit down. It is the second time since the Claudette Colbert case that a Negro woman has been arrested for the same thing. This has to be stopped. Negroes have rights too, for if Negroes did not ride the buses, they could not operate. 3/4 of the riders are Negroes, yet we are arrested or have to stand over empty seats. If we do not do something to stop these arrests, they will continue. The next time, it may be you or your daughter or mother. This woman's case will come up on Monday. We are therefore asking every Negro to stay off the buses Monday in protest of the arrest and trial. Don't ride the buses to work, to town, to school, or anywhere on Monday. You can afford to stay out of school for one day if you have no other way to go except by bus. You can also afford to stay out of town for one day. If you work, take a cab or walk. But please, children and grown-ups, don't ride the bus at all on Monday. Please stay off of all buses Monday. I'm introducing this person first because we're leading up to the holiday, the single holiday acknowledging our Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I always start off by introducing this person because she was the one that really brought him into prominence, okay? And I'm going to hold this quilt up, okay? Does it show? Okay. This is Sister Rosa Parks. She stood up by sitting down. Be aware of that. Be aware of that. That truly is a part of our history. Okay? I'm going to close that down. Okay. And at the same time, I'm going to open this one up because this is essentially who we will be acknowledging on the third weekend, okay? That third Monday of the year, okay? Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., okay? All right. As a teacher, I would often have kids to do reports or projects on Dr. King. And then I'd get after them after they would come in, and all they would say is, I have a dream, I have a dream. And I had to really acknowledge the fact that sometimes we are not very good examples because we hold our kids responsible for things that we are guilty of. Then I realized then that perhaps they had gotten some of their inspiration from something that I did. Okay. This was really one of my first quilts. Okay. So I had to realize then that I had to get away from I have a dream myself, because he said so much more than that. Okay. I'm going to close this one down now. All right. Again, back in Alabama, there is a civil rights memorial, and it's at the Southern Poverty Law Center. In the front of this center, there is, I guess you would call it a granite circular bowl that has water coming out of it. And on this granite a bowl, I'll say, are the names of any number of civil rights martyrs. Okay? I said, well, what's a martyr? Okay, a martyr is a person who suffers torture or death or endures great suffering on behalf of a principle. Now, oftentimes, people then that end up being martyrs, that's not how they intended. It wasn't something that they volunteered for. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to share with you this thing that I have on civil rights martyrs. And it starts off by saying, let me make sure I have some room here. They were children like Elizabeth Eckford, who walked silently through a crowd of cursing, spitting whites on the first day that Black children were allowed to attend Little Rock High School in 1957. Now, I have a small picture of Elizabeth walking. Again, can you imagine the first day of high school? This is Elizabeth Eckford on the first day. Can you imagine walking through a crowd like that? Can you imagine people calling her names, spitting at her? Okay, but Elizabeth Eckford. Okay. She and others refused to be intimidated. And finally, the president ordered troops to protect them so that as they went to school, they were college students like those in Greensboro, in Nashville, who sat at segregated lunch counters, enduring ridicule, threats, and beatings. They never fought back. That was a teaching of Dr. King, okay? Peaceful demonstrations. They never gave up their seats, but of their determination, because of their determination, lunch counters throughout the South were integrated. In Birmingham, okay, before I go to Birmingham though, I do want you to know that of the Little Rock 9, okay, Elizabeth Eckford was one, but another member, and this was the first one to pass, the first one to die. His name is Jefferson Thomas. I met Jeff at Cal State LA, and he ended up saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, just knowing that you're from Birmingham." And I said, "You're sorry for me? I didn't have to have people escort me to my high school classes." Okay? But at the same time, just be aware then that as you go to school, as you go places, you just really never know how that person might become a part of history. Okay? And at the same time, on his funeral program, I have a clip saying, "March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, August 28, 1963. Again, this was where Dr. King actually gave his I Have a Dream speech. And there also, you had speakers such as Mrs. Medgar Evers, okay? You had the lady then who was responsible for organizing the Little Rock 9. Okay, you had James Farmer, who was the national director of CORE. Also, Whitney Young was there. He was speaking. Roy Wilkins, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. Okay, Mahalia Jackson sang, and she was the one that spoke out and said, tell him, tell him about I Have a Dream, tell him. She was the one that really encouraged him to speak on that. And then remarks by Dr. King, a pledge by A. Philip Randolph, and closing by Dr. Benjamin Mays, who was the president of Morehouse College. So again, the top people, the top Black people at the time were there, and they were actually speaking. Okay, I want to continue reading this because there's a bit of history that you need to know. In Birmingham, heroes of the movement marched proudly despite the powerful fire hoses and vicious police dogs used against them. In Selma, they were attacked by state troopers as they tried to march for the rights to vote, and they inspired thousands from around the world to join them. Again, the rights and privileges that we now enjoy came about because of the sacrifice on others. All over the South, Blacks and whites who believed in racial equality were threatened, beaten, arrested, and killed. But they remained nonviolent themselves, and they never let violence stop them. In the end, they forced America to abolish a system of segregation that violated the most basic principles of democracy. And as I'm using these terms, I want you to just be aware of what's happening in our nation now. Please pay attention to the news. The things that, again, our people fought for today are literally being just written away with the pen. Within 15 years, Blacks had won the right to sit alongside whites on buses, in restaurants, and in theaters. White schools, swimming pools, and libraries were open to them. They had won the right to vote. The civil rights movement brought phenomenal changes to the South and to all of the country. But the progress of 3 decades did not erase the prejudice or the legacy of centuries of racial oppression. Today, the struggle for equality in education, in housing, and employment continues. And it will go on as long as there are women and men and children who believe that together we can change the world. This is the brochure. These are the martyrs. And this is not everyone then who died for, again, the rights and privileges that we now enjoy. Just be aware. Again, that was not something that many of them wanted to be known for as being a martyr. All right? As I continue, know that the city of Inglewood is one of the first cities in the nation that acknowledged the efforts of Dr. King. And this program, the City of Inglewood, 30th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration. Okay, keeping the dream alive, past and future. Okay, this one is from 2013. Okay, here's another one, and I have any number of them. I have a problem with holding on to things that I think are of historical value and historical significance. Okay, the 37th annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Commemorative Service, Parade, and Family Festival. Okay, I choose peace, love, and respect. This one was held Saturday, January the 18th, 2020. Okay, 2020. All right, and I'm going to go into greater details in a bit about some of the specific programs. One of the things then that Dr. King was really well known for was orchestrating or speaking his I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington. And again, being a teacher and having kids to just really understand what was going on. Okay, this is one child's version of the people that were there, the thousands of people who turned out for that march on Washington. Okay, and I will repeat, as you're doing your artwork, don't hesitate to sign your work, so we'll really know who to return it to. Okay, all right, but I have a dream. That's one child's vision of it. Okay. Continuing on. Oh, I'm wrapping it up. All right, continuing on. In 19, let me see. I want to tell you the truth now. Okay. In 19, come on, cooperate. 1984, the keynote speaker, okay, one of the speakers coming out to celebrate Dr. King's Day. This one was at Darby Park. This was when the park there they named it the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Center, okay? Darby Park is located at 3400 West Arbor Vita, okay? So on January 15, 1984, we had Martin Luther King III actually speak, okay? So he autographed this, and the picture here is of my son, okay, Max, okay? And he went and he pulled on his coat and he said, we talked about your dad in my class on Friday, okay? So just realize that 1984? Okay, just be aware of that. And note also that they were generous in allowing Inglewood to use the actual funeral program of Dr. King. That was handed out, and we were allowed to insert programs, the actual programs from Inglewood that year inside of it so that you would have something to remember. They called on, any number of people to be keynote speakers, okay? One of the keynote speakers, and I don't have a program to document that one though, was Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez actually spoke at one of the programs celebrating the life of Dr. King. One that I do have a record of though, this one took place January 15, 1990. And on this one, I have the autographs of Shirley Chisholm. And again, there's my son, all smiles, letting her know that we studied about you, okay? We studied about you in our classes there in Inglewood. Okay, a lot of history here. In getting ready to somewhat close out, I want to point out the fact then that Dr. King's family, okay? He had 2 daughters, 2 sons. The oldest daughter has since passed, and the youngest son died just last year, okay? I think in 2025, okay? And continuing on looking, this is a picture of Dr. King's wife, okay, at his funeral service. Be aware of that. Note also that Coretta Scott King was known as the first lady of the civil rights movement, Coretta Scott King, okay? And note also with Rosa Parks was the one that really brought him into prominence. And at the same time, did I mention the fact that even though you were asked to stay at home that one day, people stayed at home. They did not ride the buses for 381 days. When they did decide to ride the buses again, They could go wherever they wanted to on the bus, except in the driver's seat. So just be aware, we can work together. All right, closing out again. Here is the program, the Ebony program of Rosa Parks. Note then, 1913 to 2005 to 2005. When people know that you're interested in things, they will tend to make sure that you get information regarding that. So, as it turns out, I was given a copy of her program, of her funeral program, 2013 to 2005, Rosa Parks. All right. And again, once people know what you're interested in, here is a program then for Coretta Scott King, and hers was April 27, 1927 to January 30th, 2006. I would tell the students, Dr. King said so much more than I have a dream. So bearing that in mind, I'm going to share just a few of his additional quotes, and then I'm going to sign off. One of them was, rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There is an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. Another one of his comments, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Excuse me. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter for me now because I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know that we as a people will get to the promised land. Closing out for Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Praise God.